Mika Zibanejad gets testy with the media following the Rangers' loss to the Minnesota Wild. We discuss whether the frustration is starting to get to the Rangers. Also, call up Brett Berard.
You're Locked on the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blue Shirts fans, to episode number 1407 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, John Chick. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube, and today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app right now by visiting FanDuel.com and win $300 if your first $5 bet wins. And we are, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So a very frustrating 3-1 loss at home by the Rangers to the Minnesota Wild, a game in which you were kind of thinking that you could build off of what the Rangers accomplished in the last game, obviously coming back from 2 goals down on the road against Montreal, dominating the third period, pulling out a very dramatic win there. I'm not too big on game-to-game momentum, and maybe this game right here is Exhibit A, but if there was ever a time where you felt like a team could, really kind of hit the ground running based off of what they did in the game before this one, it would have been this game because, again, dramatic win against Montreal. And then, honestly, this one, I would say probably their second worst performance of the season, only to the opening night debacle against the Pittsburgh Penguins. But I wasn't the only one that was frustrated. Certainly, Ranger fans were, and at least one Ranger player was very clearly frustrated, very clearly a little bit testy with the media after this game was over. And that would, of course, be Mika Zibanejad. Now, it's not like he went nuts or like was treating people like dirt or cursing up a storm in the Ranger locker room or anything like that. Like I said, the answers were just a little bit testy. But I'll actually back up Mika Zibanejad here, because if you're not, at this point, as a member of the Rangers, a little bit frustrated, a little bit angry, a little bit upset that all these scoring chances that you're producing are not ending up in the back of the net, then something's probably wrong. I mean, I know you have to stay even-keeled and it's a long season and all that, but at the end of the day, these guys are human just like all of us, and when you're this close to scoring on this many different occasions and it doesn't happen, I do have to believe that sooner or later, the frustration is going to boil to the surface at least a little bit. And I wouldn't say that this was the game, of all the games that the Rangers have played thus far this season, where it was like high danger chance after high danger chance. They really didn't produce that many scoring chances. Gustafsson made one incredible save on Mika Zibanejad in the third period of this game to preserve the lead for Minnesota. But otherwise, I don't think he was really tested all that much by the Rangers. But as Mika mentioned during his post-game comments, he's talking about in general, thus far this season, all the different scoring chances the Rangers are producing and not being rewarded for it. And again, human nature, you have to be at least a little bit frustrated by this. I mentioned the awesome save by Gustafsson just a minute ago. Again, Mika got absolutely robbed on this play. We had Panarin circling behind the Minnesota net. He passed out in front to Mika. And, I mean, you're putting a goal on the board as you're watching this play develop. And unfortunately, just a better save by Gustafsson, full extension of his glove. I know some people are saying Mika's got to elevate the puck. And generally speaking, that might be true. There might be something to that. But, I mean, he's in deep here. He's thinking just get this shot away as quick as possible, and it's going to end up in the net. He's not anticipating that kind of a glove save by Gustafsson. Outstanding save. Not much else you can say about that. And we'll get into Mika's quotes in just a second here. But for what it's worth, I know there's mixed feelings among like hockey analytics, and certainly I share some of those mixed feelings with all of you. As I mentioned in the past, I don't want to see hockey turn into like a computer simulation. However, hockey stat cards did grade Mika as the best Ranger on the ice last night. And I would tend to agree with that. I mean, I think he played about as well or better than anybody else on the New York Rangers. But after this game was over, he was asked a question that I think a lot of us have kind of been pondering. And it's a question that, begs to be asked after a game like this, because so far this season, the Rangers are producing scoring chances. You can't take that away from them, but they're not capitalizing on them. They're not finishing them. And at a certain point, you got to start finishing some of these chances. And you can't be satisfied with simply creating the scoring chances. I mean, one night, if you truly get goalied, as the Rangers did once or twice early this season, and you had all these amazing scoring chances and just won't go in the net, okay, fine. Like, you can take the positives out of that. But when this starts to become a trend, the fact that you can't finish any of these chances, it does beg the question that was asked. He was basically asked, Mika Zibanejad, about whether it's dangerous to keep saying, well, we're getting good looks. I mean, that I'm paraphrasing a little. I'm not even sure which reporter asked that question, but that's basically what was said. And this was Mika's response to that. So if I ask you the question, what else should I do? Like, I have to score. Yes, I understand that, but I'm getting chances. I'd be more worried if we didn't get any chances. If I don't get that chance, if we don't get those chances, it's frustrating for us, frustrating for me. How many looks did we have? Not just this game, just overall. I don't know. I honestly don't know what else to do. Now, it's a lot to unpack here, but I do think that what he's saying obviously has some merit. Again, thus far this season, the Rangers have not been getting rewarded for the scoring chances that they're creating. My hope, though, is that Mika or anybody else on this Ranger team, they don't start to feel bad about it. They don't start to get down on themselves. You got to push forward. You got to keep going, and you got to figure out a way to convert on these scoring chances. I mean, that's basically the long and short of it. That's been the story of the Ranger season so far. We're only 8 games in, but the story of the Ranger season is mostly, and I emphasize mostly, it hasn't been perfect, mostly good hockey being played, complete inability, complete just not able to finish your scoring chances. I mean, that is the big thing right now that is killing this team and holding them back. Mika then was asked about creating puck luck, and this is what he had to say about that. We just have to keep going. I don't know. Do you have a better idea than what we're doing right now? Honestly, it's frustrating. I understand you guys got to ask the questions. We have to bear down on chances. I have to score on that one simple. Do I want to? Yeah, but I'm not scoring on that chance. There's a couple more that were missed, and I have to do a better job bearing down on chances that I'm given. Yeah, I mean, again, on that play, I don't think that Mika really did anything wrong. I mean, he was in position. He got to the front of the net, which is something that, the Rangers need to do more of this season for sure. And he was in position. He received the pass. He shot right away. It's kind of hard to elevate a puck when you're in that deep. I mean, how much can you possibly elevate it when you're that close to the net already? So I didn't have any issue with anything Mika did on that play. And clearly, in the aftermath of this save being made, you could tell on the ice that he was definitely frustrated. And he should be, because Mika, so far this year, now has 2 goals and 2 assists in 8 games. But he's got 2 goals despite having 31 shots on goal in the first 8 New York Ranger games. That is a shooting percentage of just 6.5%, which, I mean, there will be regression to the mean at some point here. You have to think. Mika, I mean, pretty much nobody is going to shoot at 6.5% the entire season, but it just gives you an idea of how many times he's been robbed and how many times he just, can't beat the goalie for one reason or another. For his career, he's literally double that. He shoots at 13%. So you got to believe eventually the luck is going to turn for Mika Zibanejad and the Rangers as a whole. I cannot imagine right now, though, that there are too many players in the NHL that are off to a worse start when it comes to puck luck than Mika Zibanejad. And I'm not making excuses. I understand he has to score. I get all that. I'm just stating facts here. I mean, that if you watch these games, he's been robbed many, many times early in the season. I mean, it feels like a season's worth of robberies that have already happened to Mika Zibanejad thus far. But again, the big thing for Mika, the rest of the Rangers, is not to get discouraged. Overall, I think mostly, again, it wasn't a great game last night. I just don't think the Rangers ever really found their groove, found their gear. A little bit of a slow start, which sounds like a weird thing to say when you score a minute into the action, as the Rangers did. But from that point until like midway through the second period, it was pretty much all Minnesota Wild. Overall, though, I think that this team is forming some good habits. I do think they're playing hard. The thing that's killing them right now, though, whether it's Mika or anybody else, the complete and utter inability to finish scoring chances. And eventually that has to turn. I mean, just by dumb luck, it should turn a little bit. But also these guys, again, they got to bear down, like Mika was saying, when they have these golden scoring chances, and just figure out a way, easier said than done, but figure out a way to just will the puck into the net. So in just a second, where I keep everything rolling here, I found it very, very interesting how the Rangers used the third line in this game, which is to say not much at all. They didn't really use them, especially down the stretch. They didn't get a ton of ice time. And it begs the question if there's a way to fix this. And I think I have one of the answers. That would be calling up Brett Berard. But we're going to talk about the performance of this third line, the usage of this third line, and how you solve this moving forward if you're the New York Rangers. We'll get to all that good stuff in just a second. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Monarch. Let's be honest, most of us cannot even name all of our financial investments, let alone what they're worth. Between 401ks, savings, and investments, it's easy to lose track, and that can mean leaving money on the table. That's why there is Monarch Money. It is an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or on your phone. Monarch is the best because it will help you organize your accounts, track your spending, and get a better handle on your investments without ever having to touch a spreadsheet. Monarch's visual dashboards and smart tools make it so much easier to understand where your money is going and how to make it work harder for you. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarch.com for 50% off of your first year. That's monarch.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off of your first year. And today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is also brought to you by Rugiet. Let's be real, making excuses does not solve anything, but when it comes to performance, sometimes your body just needs a little extra support, and that's where Rugiet comes in. Rugiet.com offers fast-acting, doctor-prescribed treatments for ED designed to help you stop making excuses and start making moves. Rugiet makes it so easy to get started. You just connect with a board-certified doctor, 100% online, no awkward waiting rooms, no in-person appointments. The process is fast, simple, and private, and it's all handled by real doctors. Visit Rugiet.com/LockedOnNHL to get 50% off of your first order. That's RUGIET.com/LockedOnNHL. And don't forget to use our code LockedOnNHL at checkout so they know that we sent you. Rugiet, stop making excuses and start making moves. All right, so I keep everything rolling here on Locked On New York Rangers. Huge shout out to the everydayers. As always, thank you guys so much for supporting this podcast through all the ups and downs of Ranger hockey. Rangers are not going to be back in action until Thursday at home against the Sharks. That will be the only game that the Rangers play in the next 5 days. So the schedule, after being pretty dense, is kind of lightened up, at least for the short term here. We are going to probably do a prospects episode. That's possible. If not soon, then very soon after this game, I would say. We might also be doing a crossover with JD Young of Locked On Sharks. Always good talking some hockey with JD. But for right now, let's talk about kind of an ongoing storyline, and I think one that really came to a head in this game, and that's basically the burial of the Rangers' third line, the just complete lack of usage of the Rangers' third line. They really didn't play much at all in this game in the final 7 minutes. I mean, they certainly didn't have a shift together. Now, I did happen to notice Juuso Parssinen was on the ice with about 3 minutes or 2:30 to go. But other than that, they were pretty much nowhere to be found. And this is not unusual for the Rangers so far this season. As this season has gone on, and again, I realize it's early, but this third line is getting less and less ice time, and they're pretty much glued to the bench during those crunch time moments in a game, up a goal, down a goal, tied, whatever it might be. And so that being the case, if this is how your third line is going to be used, then you need a better third line. You need better players on your third line to make better use out of your third line. And I can think of a heck of a way to make that happen. It involves the Hartford Wolfpack and calling up a prospect, but we'll get to that in just a second. As far as what's happening right now with the guys that are here, the guys that they are using, they're not using them. That's basically the long and short of it. Like, they don't get on the ice for any kind of significant time. The fourth line, they're getting shifts near the end of this game, whereas the third line is not. And I'm not even saying that's the wrong decision. Right now, the fourth line probably does belong ahead of the third line in the pecking order. But you look at the time on the ice here for these third liners. Noah Laba had just 7 minutes and 19 seconds of ice time. Now, I realize his time on the ice is at least partly skewed by the fact that he got hurt in this game. Scary situation. Got hit by the puck. A lot of blood dripping onto the ice, and him being a hockey player, he misses a couple of shifts, and he eventually comes back a little bit later with a brand new helmet. So props to him for showing some toughness and coming back. 7:19 of ice time. I mean, I don't think it would have been significantly more if he came back and didn't miss any time. So he's not really getting any significant time on the ice. Radish was at 8 minutes and 9 seconds. Juuso Parssinen was at 7 minutes and 23 seconds. And if Johnny Brodzinski was in the lineup, it would be the same thing, because him and Parson have kind of been alternating that spot on the third line there. The thing is, though, as I say all this, I can't really get mad at any of these players that have constituted the Rangers' third line this year, because, what are they doing wrong? What were you expecting from these guys that they're not giving you right now? I mean, sure, you might want at least a little bit more offense from these guys and a little bit more noticeability, but this is basically just who all these guys have always been. Now, Noah Laba is the one that doesn't really fit into that category, because obviously he's a rookie. He's getting started in the NHL. He's trying to find his footing and, hit the ground running for the Rangers. But the other three, I mean, you look at Parssinen, Brodzinski, and Radish. These guys are all veterans. I mean, Parssinen's like mid-20s. Brodzinski is like 30 or 31. Radish, if I'm not mistaken, I think is like 28 or 29. And they've all been around for like a decent amount of time, but this is who they've always been. You're not going to suddenly have one of these guys morph into a point per game player and carry the team offensively. Be an awesome storyline if that were to happen. I mean, I guess crazier things have happened in the world, but you can't expect that from these guys, especially when, they're only getting so much ice time. They're certainly not going to get any power play time. So, this is kind of just where you're at right now. I mean, there's no way you can really expect more out of these guys. You could even throw Connor Sheary into this group as well. I realize he's not really on the third line. He's on the second line. But if everybody was healthy, Sheary would not be playing in the top six because Trocheck would be there and it would bump Sheary out of the top six. And he can't even score playing in the top six, Sheary. He's got no goals and 2 assists through 8 games. So, there's not really a solution here as far as the players that are currently on the roster. I mean, you could scratch Parssinen in the next game and go back to Brodzinski, or you could even play the 2 of them and make Radish a healthy scratch for a night. That's also an option. You could do any of those things, but I just don't think the results are going to be all that much different, regardless of which 2 of those 3 is on the ice for a game. Which leads me to my next point. It is high time to call up Brett Berard to the New York Rangers. You could honestly make a case for just saying bleep it and calling up both Berard and either Gabe Perreault or Brand Othman. Perreault, we've been saying this on here, and I still do lean this way, but watching the Rangers sputter and have no depth scoring whatsoever, it is kind of making me, want to break glass in case of emergency, so to speak, and call up Gabe Perreault to the NHL because he can certainly give you a spark. I still do like the idea of him getting a little bit more seasoning in the AHL. And we talked about Othman quite a bit in a recent episode as well, where it's kind of like, he's on the trade block and the Rangers are at least going to listen to offers. And it's sort of like, okay, dude, sink or swim. You got one more chance here. We'll put you in the top 6, make the most of it, and just kind of see what happens there. But I think the most logical thing to do here, if you're only going to call up one of them, as I mentioned the other day, is to call up Brett Berard. It makes no sense having Berard rot away in the AHL while the Rangers are sputtering for offense, sputtering for goals, and getting absolutely no even medium danger scoring opportunities from their third line, which you got to figure if Berard was called up. I mean, he could honestly slot into the second line, which, I mean, if that's the case, even more reason to call him up. But even if he doesn't do that, he'll be on the third line. He can give them a little bit of a spark. There is no way right now you can tell me, based on what we saw from Brett Berard last season with the Rangers, that calling him up and putting him into this lineup in place of Parssinen or Brodzinski or Radish or maybe even Sheary. I mean, I don't think I would take Sheary out, compared to the other 3, but there's no way you can tell me that doing that would make the Rangers a worse team. There's no way you can convince me that doing that would be like horribly detrimental to Brett Berard. This guy to me looks NHL ready. He looked NHL ready last year. He got called up and basically stuck with the team. If I remember correctly, he did have to deal with an injury for a brief amount of time last year, but for the most part, I mean, this guy became a regular with the Rangers this year. And because this organization is so terrified of having to scratch a veteran or even having to waive a veteran that probably nobody would claim anyway, that they won't call him up. But at a certain point, there's got to be some organizational urgency here because we can talk about how it's early all we want, but we know every game counts in this league. And yes, there is still time to figure this out. There is still time to get things rolling. And I'm not saying that Brett Berard is going to fix everything with the Rangers and immediately come up and be a point per game player, but he will make them better. And these games at the start of the season, they count just as much as the games at the end of the season. That's why there's got to be some urgency from this Ranger organization. Call up Brett Berard, throw him out there, and see what he can do. I mean, has Taylor Radish done anything where it's like, oh my God, you got to leave him in the lineup? I mean, I know he kills penalties. Okay, fine. The Rangers have a lot of, really solid penalty killers. And that unit is off to a great start so far this season. They've barely given up any power play goals. I think maybe like 2 the entire season, whatever it is. So I don't think they would completely, implode if Radish wasn't available for one game. I think they'd be all right. So again, in no universe does putting Brett Berard in your lineup right now at the expense of one of the veteran players I just mentioned, in no world does that make you a worse team. And honestly, another reason to do this, the timing is absolutely perfect. You have, as I mentioned earlier, only one game in 5 days here for the New York Rangers. And that game is at home against the San Jose Sharks. No disrespect to the Sharks. They're 0-3-2, and I don't think too many of us picked them to win the Stanley Cup this season. This is not like going up against the big bad Panthers or the Avalanche who have all this firepower. This is a good time to get Brett Berard back to the NHL. And honestly, even as I say that, though, like even if it was one of those teams, throw Brett Berard out there anyway. He played with this team all season last year. I thought was one of the lone bright spots last year. And to me, never really looked out of place, never really looked overwhelmed. I think that would also be the case this year as well. So call him up right now today. Get him reacclimated, get him back around the guys, and then throw him out there on, what day would that be? Thursday against the Sharks. I don't see any reason not to do that at this point. So in just a second, going to keep everything rolling. I felt like the Rangers really did a nice job with their first of 8 Centennial theme nights last night. I want to talk a little bit about that and some of the old school history of the New York Rangers from 1926 to 1942. That was the time period that was covered in this game last night. A lot of former Rangers, being honored, and I thought they really did a nice job with it. So I wanted to spend some time on that, and we might continue to do that throughout the season when they have these Centennial, theme nights. So we'll get to that in just a second. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer that you do not want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right, pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you will unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. FanDuel is the best because it's got so many different ways to play. Whether you're into same-game parlays, or you really like some of those player props, or you want to bet for your team, you want to bet against your team, you've got a certain hunch that feel like you need to play, then FanDuel has got you covered. It makes watching football even more exciting when you have a little something riding on the action. Whether you're a casual fan or love diving into the stats, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. All right, let's go ahead and wrap up today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers by talking a little bit about this Centennial night. The theme last night was Birth of the Franchise. And if I'm remembering correctly, they are going to basically go in chronological order throughout the history of the New York Rangers this entire season. So far, so good. I mean, those jerseys that they've been rocking, kind of the later blue, I think those are really cool. Fans seem to really like those quite a bit. It'd be nice if the Rangers could improve upon their 0-4 record at Madison Square Garden, but I suppose all good things to those who wait. Sooner or later, they're going to win a home game. Just wasn't last night. So unfortunate that they had to lose on the first of these, themed Centennial nights. I'd love to see the Rangers go like 6-2 on these theme nights, but if we know the Rangers, they're not going to do that. They're just not going to do that. Hopefully they will. Hopefully they can prove me wrong. But typically speaking, when the Rangers have a big night, they're honoring this or they're honoring that or whatever it might be. Even in good seasons, even when this team is awesome, they just tend to lose on those nights. I don't know exactly what it is. But again, I thought the Ranger organization did a really nice job with this. The night last night actually coincided with the 99-year anniversary of Bill Cook being named the first captain in Rangers history. Now, my guess is that it's not a coincidence that they decided to have this theme night on the same night as, obviously Bill Cook being named the Ranger captain. Once they got the schedule and saw they were playing on that night, it probably made all of the sense in the world to do, this time period for your Centennial on this night against the Wild here. Bill Cook, a lot of firsts. He scored the first goal in Ranger history, led the NHL in goals with 33 in the 1926-1927 season. He had 33 goals, led the NHL back then. He formed a very dangerous top line with his brother, Fred Buncook, as well as Frank Boucher. Buncook scored a triple overtime winner in Game 2 of the semifinals against Montreal in 1932. Rangers avoided the 2-0 hole as a result of that, went on to the Stanley Cup final, and unfortunately lost to Toronto. Boucher, his family was there. He was a player, a coach, and a general manager with the Rangers for 29 years. We're back to Bill Cook now, the first Ranger captain. So Bill Cook spent all 11 seasons of his NHL career with the Rangers, won 2 Stanley Cups in 1928 and 1933. And I would say his biggest moment, 1933 finals against Toronto. Rangers won the series 3-1. Cook scored the only goal of Game 4, and he did so in overtime to give the Rangers the Stanley Cup. So it doesn't really get much bigger than that. Look, I realize this was like a million years ago, or, I guess 97 to be exact, but that's a moment, and I include myself in this, that I feel like maybe we all don't talk about enough. Now, again, it was a long time ago. Maybe there's people that aren't even familiar with this moment. But I mean, yeah, overtime game winner in the Cup Finals, you win the Stanley Cup. That should be right up there with some of the biggest goals that have ever been scored in the history of this league. And I don't think it really is. And again, the fact that it happened so long ago obviously has a lot to do with that. But man, that's a cup clincher in overtime. That's pretty awesome. Fun fact about that night, too, the trophy was not available. You heard that correctly. Imagine now a team wins the Stanley Cup and they're like, oh, the Stanley Cup's not here. Whoopsie doodle. We forgot it. We'll bring it. We'll send it in the mail to you. That's just kind of funny to think about. But also honored on this night was the family of Tex Ricard. He brought hockey to New York and unfortunately passed away in 1929, but was still alive when the Rangers won their first cup in 1928. His family was honored as well. You had Leah Hextall and Heather Hextall. They were holding up a Brian Hextall jersey. They are the granddaughter and daughter of Brian, respectively. Brian Hextall for the Rangers scored the game-winning goal in overtime in 1940, Game 6 against Toronto. I'll repeat what I just said a second ago. That moment probably doesn't get talked about enough. We'll occasionally reference 1940, but, I mean, man, walk-off, Stanley Cup game-winning goal in Game 6 to clinch the Stanley Cup, the only cup that the Rangers would win for another 54 years. Again, probably a moment that does not get talked about as much as it should. But Brian Hextall ended up playing 11 seasons with the New York Rangers, obviously a phenomenal player. We had Lester Patrick being honored as well. So what's interesting about Lester Patrick, he was a goalie, played one regular season game with the Rangers and then also one playoff game with the Rangers. And that was it as far as games played with the Rangers. He's more known, obviously, for being a coach. But I found this story very fascinating. So he did play in one game in the playoffs in the 1928 Stanley Cup Final. He was 44 years old at this time. He had to come in relief midway through the second period in Game 2 of the final. He allowed one goal, but the Rangers won that game 2-1 in overtime, and they ended up winning the Stanley Cup that season as well. So he had a little hand in that, obviously came through clutch in a big moment, and obviously a veteran player to say the least at that point. Never knew that about him. But Lester's grandson, Craig, was in attendance, and Craig is a former general manager and head coach of the New York Rangers. He actually coached Dave Maloney, and he joined John Giannone during the second period intermission for an interview. This was awesome. They showed a black and white video of Lester Patrick from back in the day. He was being interviewed. The video is, the quality is not what it is today. I think that's pretty obvious and pretty understandable. But hearing him talk about the Rangers, he was asked about the Rangers and the growing popularity of hockey in America. And this is what he had to say about it. It's remarkable the way the game of hockey has been accepted into the hearts of the great American families. In my opinion, the Rangers team of 1932-33 is the most crowd-pleasing, colorful, and polished team that's ever been my pleasure to handle. That is such like 1930s talk. It's unbelievable. But I mean that in a very endearing way. That's obviously very cool. And to have Craig in the studio, I mean, obviously that's a very impressive hockey family right there. Craig himself is a 2001 Hockey Hall of Fame inductee, the youngest general manager in Rangers history. Talked about how special it was to see the 1940 Stanley Cup winning team represented by their families that were in attendance in this game last night. And he also talked about being the Ranger GM. And one of the things that he was most proud about was some of the drafts that they had, drafting Mike Richter, drafting Brian Leetch, who obviously, let's just say they played a role in the 1994 Stanley Cup winning team. But again, this was awesome. You had the Blue Crew. They were dressed up like newsies. This is something that I talked about in the most recent episode of Locked On New York Rangers. They were out in front of the Garden, before the game started. And they're dressed all old school, and they're giving out newspapers to people going into the game for the night. Just very, very cool. It's nice to see the Rangers kind of set the tone, set the mood, so to speak, with some of these things that they did. And, I mean, 1 down, 7 to go in terms of these theme nights for the Centennial season. So if the rest of them are handled with as much, attention to detail and care and respect as they should be, again, it's your 100th season. That's very special. Then I think we're in for a treat this season. Like I said, the Rangers have to start winning some home games. That would certainly be nice. Scoring some goals would be cool, too. We got Panarin. At least he got one in this game last night. But, I don't know. There's no real reason I can put my finger on for the Rangers struggling at home. I mean, again, I think it goes back to it's not really a home and away thing. The biggest issue with this team right now is them just not finishing their scoring chances. But obviously, you get a great chance to get your first home win on Thursday against the Sharks. And I think that is probably as much of a must-win game as you can have this early in the season, because again, it's not like a literal must-win game, but come on, man. You got to get this one. You cannot start your Centennial season 0-5 at home, and you can't be losing to the Sharks. Again, no disrespect intended, but they are where they are, and they've got a lengthy rebuild that they're still kind of undertaking, and the Rangers got to figure out a way to win that game on Thursday. So fingers crossed that they do exactly that. Figure we can call it there for today. If you guys would like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, that is lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well, @jchick17. Once again, @jchik17. And definitely subscribe to Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. Thanks again, guys. I will see you next time.